See if I can get that somewhat centered so you can see it better. Well, I figured the fan was appropriate given the fact that the movie I'm going to talk about today is basically drawn and animated in the style of like the Japanese and Chinese and Asian style of painting on, the beautiful swirled lines and everything like that. I mean, like, the best answer that I can give in regards to something similar that I've talked about before is Mulan. In the beginning of Mulan and Mulan 2, the movies, they have it where, like, they start with, that type of painting style and everything like that. And I've always loved that style. I always thought it was so beautiful, and I have this beautiful fan. This one, where did I get this one? This one, oh, this fan is almost as old as I've been graduated from high school, because I believe I got this fan in Colorado with my dad. We were at an exhibit at one of the gardens there that they have, one of the big public garden areas that had like an Asian Japanese exhibit going on there, and it was beautiful, and that was where I got that fan. And then I also have a smaller fan, this one, a little more simplified, but it is a bird on there. I don't know if you can tell that, but there is a bird there. There you go. That one, I don't know where I got that one. Although I do actually have a fan that I believe is from Japan. That is this. Pretty flowers on it. This is from my cousin and his wife, because my cousin's wife is actually from Japan. And they're actually living over there in Japan right now. And I would love to get to go and see them and visit them, but money and no passport. So I'm going to talk about A Princess from the Moon. Not Sailor Moon. That'll be some other point in time. No, today I am going to be talking about the tale of the Princess Kaguya. Or Kaguya, as I'll probably end up calling her a lot, because that's the way it's pronounced in a Sailor Moon movie that deals with, like, a character of the same name. As someone who's from the moon. So, Studio Ghibli time. This, as I said, this is about the tale of Princess Kaguya, which is the 20th animated fantasy movie, drama, whatever you want to call it, produced by Studio Ghibli. It was co-written and directed by Isao Takahata, and this is his 10th, this is his 5th film for Studio Ghibli. And the movie itself is based off of the tale of the bamboo cutter from the 10th century in Japan. Now, there's other cultures within the same area, as in Chinese and some other places, that have a very similar story to them, of a girl coming down from the moon or coming down from space and being raised by peasants and blah, 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 blah. And while this movie is a version of the tale of the bamboo cutter, it does have some differences in it, mostly in the way that it ends. And I've heard the tale of the bamboo cutter before, beyond seeing this movie. So I do know that the ending of the tale, of the actual 10th century tale, is a bit more dramatic, wouldn't necessarily be the right word, but sad to a degree than the end of this movie. So this movie came out in 2013, and so it's over 10 years old, and it was actually Isao Takahata's last movie to be made before his death in 2018. So we've lost him over the course of time, unfortunately, about 6 years ago at this point in time. So going into the story, and even though I have watched the movie, there's some of the names here that are just going to be a little bit hard for me to pronounce. So I apologize if I butcher them. I'm apologizing for that right now, as I tend to do when it comes to some of these movies, even though I really like the movies. I will admit, before I get into the story, out of all of the Studio Ghibli movies, this is probably the one that's been out for so long that I've probably seen the least. It is on the longer side. And while I do like the animation, it is a little bit of like a jarring shift compared to the other Studio Ghibli movies, which is not a bad thing. It is beautifully done, and it's not the only Studio Ghibli movie to be done in a different style. I mean, they have the My Neighbors, the Yamada's movies that they've done. They're in a very different style than what you normally see from Studio Ghibli. And then there is, of course, also Earwig and the Witch, that is computer animated. That was also done by Studio Ghibli, and that's a big difference in design and artistic structure and everything like that than the majority of the Studio Ghibli catalog. But this one is The Tale of the Princess Kaguya is just kind of one of those movies where it's just like, I like the movie, but there's other Studio Ghibli movies I would prefer to watch. Kind of like when it comes to like some Disney movies or Pixar movies, it's just like, I like the majority of them. There's just some that I really like more than the others. Kaguya is still beautifully done. Don't get me wrong. It's still beautifully designed and animated and everything like that. Just not my favorite. So the story starts, and the story is actually narrated by the bamboo cutter's wife. So it's kind of narrated through her eyes, but also just kind of giving this perspective. So it's the same actress that voices the mother and voices the narrator. So the tale starts with us being introduced to this bamboo cutter who lives in the countryside, and his name is Miyatotsuko. And one day while he's out, tending the bamboo forest where he lives, because he gathers up the bamboo, and then him and his wife make lots of different things out of the bamboo. They eat it, they make baskets, and so many other things out of it that they are then able to sell. And what happens is, as he's walking around, he ends up seeing this glowing light coming from this bamboo shoot. And he moves over to the bamboo shoot, and then out of the ground sprouts another bamboo shoot. And in that, as it opens, reveals this little girl sitting inside of it. And she's just like mere inches high, so like Thumbelina concept of how small this girl is. And like he's bowing to it, because I mean if that happened to me, I'd probably be like, well, at this point in time I'd be like, okay, where's the hidden camera at that point in time? And like he bows to it, and then he like gently takes her out, and then he's been he like is just so fascinated with her in his hands, and like she kind of like falls over and she's asleep, and he like carefully takes her back home, back to where his wife is. And the two of them end up kind of end up a little bit of like fighting over her a little bit, to the point like the mom's there, the woodcutter's wife is just like, no, she needs to be she needs to be raised, or I want to look at her, and blah 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 blah. And then like the little girl grows, and very very rapidly, up to the size of like a newborn or so, and just starts crying, because most babies will start crying at any given point in time. And she just starts crying, and they're like, okay, well, they get her all wrapped up, and they're like, okay, well, we gotta go get food for her, and blah 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 blah. And so they start making their way to where a wet nurse would be, so that way they can get her food. And on the way there, the woodcutter's wife just kind of has this moment where she's just like, and she's able to produce milk, and she's like much past the time frame where she would be able to do this. So it's just like, it's this miracle type of a thing. And the woodcutter and his wife, they give thanks for the fact that now that they have this daughter, and they can raise her as their own, and they will love her as their own, and they just adore her. And the father ends up basically calling her little princess all the time, as his name for her, because they don't have an actual nickname for her. And then, we cut to a couple of days or a couple of weeks later, and eventually the little princess is able to start crawling, and she's like trying to chase little frogs. And there's like some boys that live in the area that are like woodcutter and carver children and stuff like that. And like they're like, oh my god, there's a baby in there. And you know, you know, the princess, who I'm just going to refer to as Kaguya because that ends up being her name, ends up, she ends up growing very rapidly. Like she goes from like the crawling type of child to like a toddler up on her, up on her feet and being able to walk around. And like this literally happens right in front of the boys, and they're just like, she just grew really quickly. Yeah. Okay, she grew like bamboo. Her nickname is now Little Bamboo. And that is what they continue to call her for the rest of the show, for the rest of the movie. Whenever they interact with her, they call her Little Bamboo. And so we have like this going on there where it's just like the boys call her Little Bamboo and the father calls her Princess and everything. And I mean, the wife calls her Princess as well. Her mother calls her Princess. And over the course of time, you know, the princess Kaguya grows and grows, and she spends lots of time playing with the boys from the area where they live, and she spends time with her parents, with like helping her father gather bamboo, with helping her mother with like weaving and different things like that. And so she's learning like how she would survive in the countryside and everything like that. And eventually what ends up happening is, while all of that is going on, the father, the bamboo cutter, also, he keeps working his bamboo forest, and he ends up finding another bamboo shoot or a stalk that is glowing, and he cuts into it, and out comes gold. Just like gold, just like comes out of the bamboo stalk. And he's like, okay. So he like gathers up the gold, and then there's another time while he's roaming, a little while later, while he's out, harvesting bamboo, where he ends up finding another one that's glowing, and he cuts into that and opens it. And actually out of it bursts all of these gorgeous, beautiful robes and, fabrics and kimonos type stuff that would be, wonderful for like a princess to wear, that would be suitable for this very, very high class person to wear. And he's just like, okay, and he like gathers all of that up. And while Kaguya has been out building bonds with the boys from the village and everything like that, and becoming friends with them and running around and kind of roughhousing with them a little bit at times, and they keep watching her grow. There is one of the boys who's the main one, whose name is Sutemaru, and he is kind of the one that like Kaguya has the closest bond with and everything. So we see them being friends and everything like that. And there's a moment where like he ends up getting hurt, and she like rips her own rips the cloth that she uses to like make a bandage for him and everything like that. And because his well-being is more important than the fact that she ripped her clothes, she doesn't care. And she just adores getting to live in the countryside and be around her parents and be around her friends and everything like that. And she's happy and content and just, likes the simple things in that regard. And what happens from there is, while all of that has been going on, her father, who has gotten this gold and gotten these robes from the bamboo shoots, tells her mother that it's just like, okay, there has to be something. This is a sign from the moon that our princess is meant for something more than just being here. So he starts to make lots of trips to the city, where he, takes the gold and he takes the kimonos, and he is working on getting a place set up there for them to go and live, because he has all of this money now that he's able to buy. He's basically like a nouveau riche person who is able to buy this beautiful mansion and be able to set it all up and hire servants and hire a teacher and everything like that. And he comes back, and it's like on the same day that like Kaguya and Sudamaru and the other boys were all gonna plan to have like a nice big quail dinner the next day or whatever, with like soup and mushrooms and everything like that, lots of like stuff that they had foraged for. And her mother and father are all like dressed to leave, and she's like, what's going on? And they're like, well, it's time for us to go to the city. And he's like, and she's like, okay. And what ends up happening from that is, they head off to the city. They ride to the city, and Kaguya wakes up in like this carriage, and she is, brought to, where the mansion is, and she's brought out of the carriage, and she has these servants waiting on her. And then she's like wandering around, and she finds her parents, and they're all like gussied up, covered in makeup and everything like that. And her, the mom's got like the white face paint, and so does the dad, and like they're both trying to like sit very prim and properly and everything like that, which is not very good because they just can't quite get it right. The dad's trying more, but the mom is like, okay, I'll give it a shot. But the mom is still would have been very content living in the countryside, as would her daughter, would Kaguya. And the father, the woodcutter, explains to Kaguya that this is going to be our new home. And we have all of, he shows her all of the different robes and kimonos and stuff like that had been sent down from the moon, that had popped out of the bamboo. And she is running around and looking at all of them and everything like that. And she just loves all of them. She thinks they're all so pretty, and they are very pretty robes and kimonos and everything like that. So I'm not going to deny that they are gorgeous. And she runs around the palace a little bit, looking around at everything, and just thinks it's so amazing. And then what ends up happening is she is introduced to her teacher, Lady Sagami, and the teacher. The teacher is supposed to be this woman that has been brought down from the palace to help train Kaguya to become this princess, to be able to be in high society, be in, this very, high ranks and everything like that her father is trying to work his way into in this regard. And, so so that's what the teacher is for. And we have these kind of, teaching scenes where there's one where it's like, we're going to teach you how to be able to stand properly, and then it's just like, oh, some of this other stuff. One of the other ones is this is the proper way to read a scroll, that is a scroll covered in the artwork, that this stuff that's stories and stuff like that, and making sure that Kaguya can read and write and do calligraphy and drawing and everything like that, stuff that a proper lady should be able to do. And there's a moment with the scroll where they're, she's trying to show her the proper way of reading the scroll, and Kaguya is just screw that, it just pushes the whole scroll so it just unfurls all the way, and she's like, see, now you can see the whole story. And Miss Sagami is just like, oh god. And there's also she's learning how to play an instrument, and she's able to do it very, very quickly. But whenever it's just her and Lady Sagami, she's kind of goofing off and everything like that, not taking the lessons seriously. But whenever her father is there or her parents are there, she demonstrates these amazing skills of being able to play beautiful music on the instrument, and being able to, act perfectly as a lady and everything like that. And Sagami even tells this to her dad. It's like, when you're around, she's wonderful. When it's just me, she's not always so well behaved. So they have those interactions, and then there's other stuff where it's part of like trying to like physically groom her, as in like, it's like, pluck her eyebrows is one of the things they want to do, and they want to like paint her teeth black because that's something that's considered proper at that point in time. Do not ask me why. I don't know. I have seen that in other media, and I'm just like, that just, I don't know why they think that that's a good idea to like paint your teeth black. Ugh. I don't know. It's a symbol of high class society or whatever at that point in time. Because they reference it in other anime at various points in time as well. Well, they'll have women have their teeth painted black, and I think even throughout the course of the movie we see a couple of the men that have their teeth painted black as well. So there's that, but like Kaguya does not want that at all. She doesn't want to have her eyebrows plucked. She doesn't want to have her teeth painted black and everything like that. But while all of that is going on, her mother also just still has like this little kind of cottage type thing built in as part of the mansion, and has like her own little garden and everything like that in the by her little cottage. And the mom basically still spends her days doing the same stuff she used to. She would weave baskets, she would work on the loom and make cloth and everything like that, because that's where the mother feels more comfortable, or she would cook there or different things like that. And Kaguya likes to spend a lot of her time in there as well with her mother, because it's a little bit of like an escape from everything else that's going on. And at one point, when it gets to the point where she's come of age, take that however you wish, interpret that however you wish, when she comes of age, her father decides that it is time to have a proper naming ceremony for her, and to have this big party. So he invites this priest to come, who is supposed to go through and determine a name for Kaguya based off of how she looks and everything like that. And so kind of the whole trying of Miss Sagami to try to like groom her, pluck her eyebrows, and put the black stuff on her teeth and everything like that is like happening on the same day that like the priest is coming to see her. And Kaguya wants nothing to do with it, and she ends up running outside and actually ends up like playing with a cat that's there, that's adorable, while the priest shows up, and he's like, he sees her playing with the cat, and she just kind of like scurries off after that. And the priest is like, oh no, it's like her father is like trying to apologize, and the priest is like, no, it's fine. And I would prefer to see her naturally than like all gussied up and everything like that, so I can try to define a true name for her. And so Kaguya comes out, and she's just in the nice pretty robes that she has, and she plays the instrument, what I cannot remember what it's called. And the priest is like watching her, and he's very like taken aback by how beautiful and how graceful she is and everything like that. And like Kaguya's parents are there, as is Miss Sagami and her other lady in waiting and everything like that are there, as she's like meeting the priest for the first time, and showing off like her musical skills and how lovely she is. And he is just overcome by her beauty and her gracefulness and everything, and he he dubs her Princess Kaguya, or as I guess it would be in the Japanese, Kaguya Hime, since Hime is princess. And what ends up happening is the father is delighted about this, because he's been calling her princess her whole life and everything. And they're just like, oh yay, finally. And then like the priest leaves, and they're like, now we're going to have a party. And Kaguya is just like, oh, can we invite all my friends from the village? It's been so long since we've seen them. And the father is just like, no, we're not inviting any of those like country bumpkins and everything like that. No, we're going to invite all of these different high-ranking nobility and royalty and everything like that. And people with important positions, the men with important positions, here to celebrate this. And they have this huge party, and it lasts for 3 days and 3 nights. And during this whole time frame, even though like they're having this big party in Kaguya's honor, she is like off to the side in this like little confined room, where she's brought food by her lady in waiting and everything like that, and she like sits there, and I think she's like either painting seashells, or she had seashells there that were painted, or whatever the case may be. And she's just like, it's my party, but I'm not even here, I'm not even there, I'm not allowed to be around the party goers, I'm not allowed to do anything, I sit in this room, but hidden away while they have this huge party. But she's able to like hear the different conversations that are going on and everything. What ends up happening on one of the last nights of the party is that she hears a bunch of these different partygoers who are drunk start complaining about the fact that her father will not allow them to see her, that like, oh, her beauty can't be nearly as what it's claimed to be, that you must have bought her this name just like you bought yourself this title, and that you're not actually nobility or anything like that. And Kaguya hears this as this is being said to her father, and she just has like a panic attack basically, and she just like bolts from the room she's in, and like bolts through various doors all throughout the mansion, and makes her way out of the mansion and down the road, and just like her robes are like falling off as she's doing this, layer after layer, as she's running past with like the moon high in the sky. And she runs and runs and runs, and eventually, by the time she stopped running, she is in the countryside, on the small mountain where she grew up. And she even comes by what I think is supposed to be the same house that she grew up in, and there's like a new family living there. And she's like, she kind of honestly, because of how quickly she ran away, and the fact that she's kind of all dirty and she doesn't have any actual robes on or anything like that, like her under robes or whatever it would be called, most of the people are just like, who the heck are you? And they just want her to go away. And she's just like very befuddled by this, and she like looks around trying to find where Sutamaru, where his house would be and everything like that. And she ends up finding someone who's like a coal burner, or a charcoal maker, and she asks him where they went, and he's like, well, they left the mountain because they've worked the forest as much as they can. So every 10 years they have to leave from where they are on the mountain to a different area, so that way the mountain can replenish itself. It's basically this whole concept of like, the same thing happens when it comes to crops and everything else too, where it's just like, even animals do this as well, where they know that if they overgraze in certain areas, it's going to cause the area to not be able to repopulate itself with new grass and new bushes and trees and everything like that. So it would hurt their food supply. So that's why herds roam around. Humans do the same thing at this point in time, where they will move from one area to the next, on a different part of the mountain and everything like that, so that way the mountain can replenish itself. And on her way, and after she's done talking to like the charcoal burners, she starts making her way back towards the capital, and she actually ends up falling asleep in the snow, where she passes out. But when she wakes up, she's actually back in her room, and she's like still back in her robes and everything like that she'd been in. And it's like no time has passed, and she's just like, did I even go anywhere? Was that a dream? Was that real? What just happened? Is like what she's trying to figure out. But like the party finishes up and everything like that. And what ends up happening after that is that over the next, since, the week since the party, what ends up happening is her handmaid keeps getting all of these different, proposals sent to her to get, given to her to give to Kaguya, and is, just, Kaguya wants nothing to do with any of them because she doesn't want to belong to someone. And she is just, she's just not interested in any of that. But like her father and Lady Sagami are like, but this would be very important stuff for you to, be able to read. This is important stuff for you to read and look at and think about and everything. And she wants nothing to do with it. And then we are introduced to the 5 men who actually end up coming to try to court her. And they are, each of them are these 5 very high noblemen. And they are like, one of them, like, I think 2 of them are princes, and one of them's like 2 of them are like ministers, and someone else is like a counselor and stuff like that. So they're very, very high ranking men in this society. Now, bear in mind, at this point in time, it was perfectly natural for men who were of a high enough rank to have multiple wives. So some of these guys are already married, and they end up, what ends up happening is one of them had called the priest who gave her name, gave Kaguya her name, to him, and he stupidly has this like meeting with him in front of the other 4, who all end up hearing about this, because like the priest is like describing how beautiful she was, and explains about her lineage of actually being like this, she was born and sent from the moon and appeared in the forest and blah 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 blah. And they're like, oh, she might be some type of a sprite or a nymph or something like that, like a goddess in human form. And this leads to, and like he gives them this description of her beauty and charm, which basically then results in all 5 of these guys in their carriages or on horseback just rushing as fast as they can to Kaguya's home, to the palace. And they're all eager to wed her, and all of us like just rushing their way there. And they all have like these marriage proposals for her, and her father is just so befuddled as to what is going on with like all these high-ranking men arriving there and like giving them these proposals for his daughter's hand in marriage. And so he gives them to Lady Sagami, and Lady Sagami takes them to Kaguya, and it's just like, this is, you would be perfectly happy marrying any of these men. You'd be well taken care of. It would be a wonderful thing. And and Kaguya has no interest in any of them, because she's just like, but I don't want to belong to anyone. I don't want that. I don't understand. She's like, she doesn't seem to grasp the concept of like, because her father and Lady Sagami are, have both basically had it drilled into them that like, your happiness is dependent upon whom you marry, the status of the person that you marry, and the status that you gain by marrying them. And that the higher up the person is that you marry, the higher up of a man she marries, the happier she will be. Not true. That has been proven time and time again in history. That, oh yeah, I married someone who's at the top of the food chain in regards to hierarchy and power and everything like that. Are you happy? I have money, but are you happy? Not necessarily. Point proven. And what happens from there is Kaguya is just like, fine, I will meet them. And she has it where, she's set up behind the screen so they cannot see her. And all 5 of them like rush over to the screen and are just, they're all like, basically what ends up happening is she ends up having them all talk to her and explain how much they love her, even though she's like, explain to me how your feelings for me, even though you have never laid eyes on me, type of a thing. So she's like that. And what ends up happening from there is each of them end up comparing her to different things. One of them compares her to the branch of a jeweled tree from the island of Harai. One of them compares her to Buddha's stone begging bowl. Another compares her to a robe of fire rat fur. Another one compares her to a jewel from the dragon's neck. And like the last one, the youngest one, compares her to a cowrie shell that is used by swallows. It is much more of a more common type of thing, but all of these are like very legendary things that they are trying to compare her beauty to. And the one that she actually kind of has an interest in is like the cowrie shell one, because he's not comparing her to like this amazing mythical type treasure. I mean, it's still something that they're not 100% sure exists, because it's still kind of like connected to mythology, but it's still something that's more realistic and more humble. And so all of them are like arguing over her beauty, and she's like listening as they describe all of this stuff. And so what she ends up doing is she thinks and she's like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. Very well then. She's like, okay, very well then. Whichever one of you, I set you the task of whichever one of you is able to bring me the treasure that you have compared my beauty to, then I shall wed them. And like all of the suitors are just like, ah, and the dad is just like, ah, and Lady Sagami is just like, oh god, and like all of them are just like, oh my god, why did she make that comment? And they're just like, ah, like, you know, bring me the jeweled branch, bring me the bowl, bring me the, you know, the fire rat fur, bring me this, you know, bring me the dragon's gem, bring me the cowrie shell. And they're all just like, and the dad's like, but they were just comparing your beauty to those. Those are impossible things to find. And she's like, then their love for me is impossible, and unless they can prove their love to me by bringing me one of these objects, then it is impossible for me to know whether or not they truly love me. And I love how she spins that, and it's so great. And all of them leave at that point in time, and the father is just like apologizing, and like they're all leaving, and Lady Sagami just quits because she's just like, I can't deal with this anymore. I can't deal with this. And Sagami leaves. And at this point in time, Kaguya is just like, yeah, no. She's like cleaning off all of the makeup from her and like, you know, getting rid of the black on her teeth and everything. And what ends up happening from there is she's just ecstatic because like all the other would-be suitors that had been waiting outside the palace have left as well. So it's just like her little plan to get all of them to leave her alone worked at that point in time. So she's just like very happy about that. But like her father is just like, how could you have done that? You know, you just brushed aside 5 of the highest ranking men in our society, in our area, and in the country. Why did you do that? Type of a thing. And so he's dealing with that. At this point in time, you know, it's like eventually it's like spring comes around, and Kaguya wants to go. Kaguya's mother decides to take her out to go and see the cherry blossoms with her handmaidens. And they all head out to the countryside. The dad kind of refuses to go with them because he's still angry at Kaguya for, you know, her stunt with the suitors. But like the rest of them go, and like she's just like loves being back in the countryside and seeing the area where she grew up, and she, you know, runs around in the cherry blossom trees. And while they're there, she interacts with this family who literally just like seem terrified of her, and then like they leave, and then Kaguya is sad, and they make their way back to the city. And while they are in the city on the way back to their mansion, they end up coming across Sutamaru, who is of course the friend that she had back on, the leader of like the boys that were on the mountain. And he's trying to like steal this like quail or chicken or whatever, so that way they can actually eat that night, so him and his group can eat that night. And what ends up happening is he gets caught because they saw each other, and she recognized him and he recognized her, and then he gets caught and beat up in front of her, which makes her just like so sad, and she doesn't know how to react to that. And you know, he tried to go after her, but he gets beaten up for his attempts and everything. And over the course of like the next 3 years, as I believe what it says in the film, Kaguya has, you know, she's kind of enjoyed her a little more freedom in regards to the fact that she doesn't have being inundated by suitors all the time and everything. And she's spent a lot of time with her mother out in like, you know, the little back house area with like their little garden and everything like that. And she just adores spending time with her mother out there and just not have to deal with trying to be this prim and proper lady all the time. And she's been building, you know, her little garden and everything like that just kind of looks a bit like the mountainside and all of that. And the mother is just very gentle with her at all these times. But the father keeps having these times where he comes in and he's just like, you don't seem to understand the gravity of what you did with, you know, setting all of those men, you know, those impossible tasks. But apparently they may not actually be all that impossible, because what happens is Um, uh, After the 3 years, one of the suitors, the one who had said that he could bring her the branch from the island of Harai, this jeweled branch, has returned, and he claims that he has it. He even has this whole show of like showing up in his traveling clothes, and like he brings in this beautiful, branch that looks like a cutting from a tree that's covered in all these amazing jewels and everything. And he spins this amazing story about traveling and finding the island and finding the branch and bringing it back to her and everything like that, as she's like looking at the branch from the other side of her covered area where she is, her screened off area, as he's like spinning this tale and like showing her the branch. And it is very beautifully made. I am not going to argue with that. And what ends up happening from there is, as that's happening, Kaguya is just kind of like, she's getting very worried at that point in time, because she's like, oh, maybe he actually managed to do this, and now I'm gonna have to marry him, type of a thing, is like what she's worried about. But what happens is, as this is happening, there's this huge commotion in the courtyard that is actually a bunch of these craftsmen showing up, and they explain that the guy who had brought her the branch had actually commissioned them to make this branch to look like a branch from the island of Harai, and how it's made with all these different rare gems and jewels and everything like that, and gold, and how he has not paid them yet. So they came here because they knew that he was courting her, and that maybe she would pay them instead. And so they're just like running around causing a ruckus since they got inside, and like he kind of like creeps off. The suitor kind of like creeps off, because he's like, oh, I guess that's not gonna work anymore, and he like leaves, and he takes the branch with them. And the father comes back in, and he's just like, where did he go? And Kaguya is just like, oh, he left, but we should definitely pay the craftsmen for their work. It was a beautifully made branch, so I'm assuming they pay the craftsmen. I mean, it's not like they don't have the money. But like after that, it is, the second of the suitors arrives, or one of the next suitors arrives, and he's the one that claimed that he would bring her the fire rat robe. And, oh boy. And he claims this, by the way, I don't exactly know what a fire rat is, but the only image I have in my head of any type of a rat in that regard are the rodents of unusual size from The Princess Bride, and they get caught on fire at one point when Wesley's fighting one of them. But that's my brain. Yeah, that's my brain. But what ends up happening is he comes claiming that he has acquired the robe of fire rat fur. And part of the thing with the fire rat fur is that it can be dropped into fire, and while it will burn off anything that is not, the robe itself or the fur itself, it will burn away impurities and such, that it would be immune to fire. So like you could like douse it in kerosene and drop it in fire, and like the kerosene would burn away, but the fire rat robe itself would remain. And Kaguya is like being shown this and everything like that. Again, she's behind the screen, so he can't see her, so the suitor can't see her, and she's like, drop it in the fire. And he's like, he's like, okay. And like they have someone put it into the fire, and like for a moment she's kind of worried that like it didn't look like it was burning, and she's very nervous because her hands are shaking. And what ends up happening is it actually does start to burn, and he freaks out and he runs over and he starts like trying to grab it out of the fire, like burning his hands, and he's like, my fortune is burning up in my hands, and he's like dropping it on the ground and trying to like put it out, but it's like it burns away and disintegrates and everything. And he's just like, he has like a fit about this, and Kaguya is just like, okay, that's okay, I dodged that one. And so like he has a fit over the fact that she made him burn away his fortune. I'm like, you're the one that tried to make the fake fire rat robe, dude, and didn't think she would be smart enough to say throw it in the fire and prove it can't burn. So there's that. So he's out. And then there's another suitor who shows back up, who is the one claiming that he would try to find her Buddha's begging bowl. And what he does is he returns and he offers her this beautiful flower, claiming that its beauty reminded him of her. And from what happens from that is he gives her this whole big speech about wanting to be with her and wanting to have this simple life in the country and blah 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 blah, and still going through all of this stuff, and this beautiful speech, and like she kind of looks like she's fallen for it a bit. And what ends up happening is we cut to the prince on the outside, and he pulls back this curtain to try to see her, and then there's this woman sitting there that looks very angry at him, and it's his wife. And she's just like, you claimed all those things to me as well. And he's just like, I'm sorry, and like looks terrified of her. So it's like, that's done. And Kaguya has this moment where she is just like, she's like, I almost fell for that. I could have been just like some other girls who fall for just pretty words because of it. And she just has this whole setup of this, and she's just so kind of upset with that. And then when it comes to the last two suitors, one of them who had gone out to try to find her the jewel from the dragon's neck, him on his journey to try to find it, him and his crew were attacked by this huge storm that like he keeps seeing dragons in whenever he looks at stuff. Attacked them, or they were hit by the storm, and they unfortunately sank at sea, and he died. And then the last one, the youngest one, who is actually the one that mentioned the swallow, the cowrie shell of a swallow, the one that she actually seems somewhat interested in, because his gift was much more down to earth as opposed to the other ones. Unfortunately, in his attempt to try to get it, he ends up falling to his death and breaks his back. And so she is just distraught about this, because it's one thing to like lead two of them to like spending their fortunes stupidly on her. It's another one to like trick the guy into trying to pull the same trick on her, or the same moves on her that he pulled on his own wife. She did not intend for the other two to die. She did not wish that type of ill upon these men. But what happens from there is she just ends up actually going into a bit of a state of depression, where she ends up like actually tearing through the garden that she has built, and being angry about the fact of it's just like, all of this is fake. It's fake. It's not real. It's based off of just a fake idea of building a mountain like where we used to live. And she just has like this horrible kind of outburst and depression set up, and the mom is there and trying to like calm her down and everything. And after that, she just spends hours working at the loom in the small hut that they have, where she, in the mansion, where she just like focuses on that. And well, all this other stuff has been going on with like her, like as is said here, the emperor has actually been aware of what's going on. He's been told the stories about how she led these 5 men around by their noses, and led 2 of them to ruining their fortune, 1 of them to making a fool of themselves, and 2 of them unfortunately to death, which was not her intention. And he's just like, and like he's heard of her beauty and everything like that. Then again, bear in mind, none of these men have actually seen how lovely she is. It is going off of the basis of her name and what this priest has said about her. So it's just like, it's this amazing, like this legend about how lovely and beautiful she is and everything. And the emperor has gained this all of this, her exploits have like gained his attention. And he's like, very well then. If she's done this, then her wish must become my wife, or her wish, her desire must be to become mine. And so he sends a letter to her father stating that, if she marries me, if you bring her here to marry me, then and I approve of her, then I will give you a title as like the royal whatever, or blah 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 within court. And the father is so happy about this, and he runs and he tells Kaguya and her mother about it. And he's just like, this is wonderful, this is the best thing that could have happened, and blah 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 blah. And he's just like so ecstatic about it. And Kaguya basically like looks at her father, and she's like, if this is truly what you want, then I will go and marry the emperor. But know that as soon as your request is filled, I will kill myself. And like that, like very much shocks both of her parents. Fair enough on their parts for being very shocked about that. She's like, I don't want that. She doesn't want to become this possession of the emperor's just because it would make her father happy. She would, but then she would end her life, which is, I believe, the way that it's supposed to end in the actual story of the bamboo cutter, where it's just like she does marry the emperor, but then she does die, but in his grief, because the emperor truly did love her, or whatever the case may be, he finds out that it was she only married him to make her father happy. And he then punishes the father. As opposed to with this, where it's the father kind of backs down a little bit from that. But like her denial just makes the emperor even more curious, and he makes a visit to the palace, to the family's home. And he looks, her father brings her to where she is, and like he gets to look at her like behind this curtain, and he sees her playing her instrument. I do not remember the name of the instrument, I apologize. Sees her playing that, and it's beautiful, and he thinks she's gorgeous, and he goes around to attempt to try to get to her, and he comes up behind her and grabs her, and she just has this look on her face of like, oh God, no. And she's like, why are you here? And he's like, I'm here to take you with me, to make you mine. And she's like, for all intents and purposes, she's basically having a panic attack, and I don't blame her. She basically seems to be able to go non-corporeal and like slip out of his hands with like just the robe left. And she's like vanished, and he can't figure out where she went, and he's just like looking around, goes out of the room, looks around, can't find her, looks around again and again, and then it like, as like he's like moving back and forth behind him, she appears again, and he like sees her, and he's like, ah, type of a thing, like the jump scare. And like he made it was like, just let me see you one more time, and I will leave. And and like, so she shows herself, and he like tries to go to her again, but she like moves away, and she's like, you promised. And he's like, and he like looks at her again, and he's like, fine, then I shall withdraw, but you will be in my thoughts, and I will be back. And he leaves. And after this, what happens is, like, every night after that, Kaguya goes out to the little pond pool that they have there that like reflects the moon, and she looks up at the moon, and she like plays on her instrument every single night. And her parents can't quite figure out why, and they end up asking her, and she explains that I am from the moon. I have remembered that. I remembered why I came to Earth all those years ago. That on the moon is very different than what is here, and that when she had been on the moon before coming down to Earth and being, incarnate as like a child, she had met a woman on the moon who had been to Earth. And while the woman did not remember anything from Earth, because when you return to the moon from being on Earth and you are wrapped in like the moon's heavenly robes, all memories of Earth are like wiped from your mind. So it's just like you're not going to remember anything. So you could live 100 years here, and the second you go back to the moon and you put that robe on, you're going to forget everything. And so she explains to her parents that she had wanted to come to Earth to see what it was like, and that there have been others who have come to Earth before, and she ends up singing this song that she's been singing throughout the whole movie, birds, bugs, bees, plants, flowers down below. I apologize if that was completely off key. I'm not singing the whole thing, but like she's been singing that through a good portion of the movie at various points in times, either with her friends or with her mother or different things like that. And she is just she wanted to see what it was like to be down here. She wanted to be with the birds and the beasts and the bugs and the humans and everything else down below, because it seemed much more alive than what was on the moon. And so she explains to her parents that like the people from the moon are actually coming for her. That when the emperor had showed up and had grabbed her, that she had wished that she didn't want to be here anymore. And that is enough of a shift in stuff, or enough of a request, that the people of the moon are going to come and pick her up on the 15th night. I don't know if that's supposed to be the 15th night of the new moon or of the next month or whatever, but on the 15th night, the people of the moon are going to show up. And the reason she's been out on the little balcony thing playing music every night up at the moon has been her trying to beg them to not come, to allow her to stay here longer, to stay with her parents, to stay with her friends, and everything. And she's just been like, begging them, but they refuse. And after, and while this is going on, the father gets this, the father is like, I'm not going to let that happen. I'm not going to let them take away my daughter. I'm not going to let them do that. We will fight. And he goes and he basically, he's like, I will protect you with my own two hands if I have to, because they are not taking you from me. And he goes and he like hires all these soldiers, and he starts building like these ramparts to be like built around their mansion, so that way they can defend her from the moon. Which, I mean, you're getting paid to build stuff, so it's not like it's that big of an issue to a degree, but it's just like rumors are going to get around of just like, why is this guy turning his house into a fortress? Apparently his daughter is going to be taken by people from the moon. Okay, just whatever. So it's just like, you get enough people to go along with it, okay. And like, so like they're building all of this stuff, and while that's going on, Kaguya is spending some more time with her mother and just kind of relaxing, and she decides that she wants to go, or since she is getting so sad again, the mother tells one of the handmaidens to gather up, to get a carriage ready, so that way they can go out to the countryside one last time, or attempt to go out to the countryside, which for what might be their last time. And they make their way out to the countryside, and she's so happy to be out there. And while they are there, she ends up coming across Sutamaru. I probably said his name like 4 different ways at this point in time. But she comes across Sutamaru and his family. He is married and he has a baby. And, like the group have made their way back to the forest after 10 years of roaming around in a different area, so that way the forest could regrow, and now they've returned. And he ends up finding her in one of the fields there, and they end up having this conversation where she kind of explains, she's like, I really wanted to stay here with you guys. I didn't want to go to the capital. I didn't want to go live in a huge mansion. I wanted to stay here and be with my friends, and I would have been happy here. And he's like, yeah, you would have been happy here with not having all of the luxuries and everything like that you have now. And she's like, I would have been happy, and I would like to stay here with you and just live here off the countryside and everything else. And he's like pointing out like the bad parts of it as well, with like being half starved and having to steal food and stuff like that. And she's just like, but I would be happy here. And she's just very adamant about that and wanting to try to find a way. She wants to stay there. And she even says something about before they come to take me away or whatever. And I'm assuming I don't remember if she actually mentions it in the conversation, but like something about the emperor does come up, and he's like, why wouldn't you want to marry the emperor, blah 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 blah. And you know, she's just like, I don't want to be, I don't want to be that. I want to be free and happy and everything. And from there, what happens is they end up basically like, you know, he says so tomorrow, Sutamaru is just like, fine, then we'll run away together and start a new life together. And so he takes her hand, and this ends up result, they run through the fields, and she's just like very happy, and she's like knocked off her kimono, and it's just like running through the fields and everything like that. And where she grew up as a child. And as it turns to the day starts to go on, what happens is they end up taking hands, and they end up actually flying like through the countryside and through the sky and over the ocean, and beautiful landscapes that they're flying past, and flying with the birds as they like fly through the air. And like as it turns to night, they get they seem to get closer and closer to the moon, and this kind of freaks her out, and she just like curls into him, and she's just like, don't let me go, don't let them take me, just let me stay a little longer. And he's like holding her, and he's just like, I'm not going to let you go, and I'll keep you safe. And like they end up plunging, she falls out of his grasp, and it's just plunging into the water and into the ocean below. And he wakes up, and he's back in the field where he was before at the and it's again, did that happen? Was that a dream? What just happened? And his wife and child find him there, and he returns to them, and he's just like, he's like, I'm gonna stay with them. And at this point in time, Kaguya, along with her mother and such, have returned to the palace where her father and the soldiers are ready. And it's it's the 15th night, and it's time for this like huge procession on a cloud of all of these citizens from the moon descending to Earth, descend down from the moon. And they're playing beautiful instruments, and it's just, they all look very ethereal and everything like that, and they're like floating down on a cloud, and it's like a parade procession type thing. And like the father is there and ready, and like they all have arms and archers, and they fire arrows, and the arrows turn into flowers. And Kaguya is like back in a different part of the house with her mother trying to hold her. And like the handmaiden had been there, and like she has like a sword on a she has like a spear type thing, or a pole arm thing, ready to like help fight and defend the princess and everything. And as the music is playing, and as the procession from the moon is arriving, everybody starts to fall asleep. All of the different warriors begin to fall asleep. But, the father doesn't, and he tries to get to where Kaguya is. And while this is going on, Kaguya, her mother and her are back and hidden in the house. But like as they hear the music reach them, Kaguya just kind of like, much to her mother's horror, just like rises up, and she is just drawn towards the procession, like just like floating over the ground, out of her mother's arms, much to her mother's horror, which I wouldn't blame her in the slightest for being horrified by this, as like Kaguya is like drawn back to where the procession is, and drawn in by the music and everything. And what happens is, the father and the mother have like tried to get to her, but they can't quite get there. And what happens is, one of the handmaidens shows up, and well, first what happens is like Kaguya gets to the cloud where they're all waiting, and they have like the main figure who, okay, I don't know if the main figure guy is supposed to be Buddha or not, or if he's just supposed to be like a moon person. I'm not sure. I don't know. They don't ever specify in the movie. But like him and like one of the assistants, like they, Kaguya puts like this crown on her head, and they're getting ready to put the robe on her that would make her like forget about this life. But like as that's about to happen, her handmaiden shows up with a small procession of children and animals, and they're all singing the song, the birds, beasts, birds, beasts, birds, beasts, bugs, plants, flowers, like that song. And that like kind of gets through to her, and like at this point in time, her parents have kind of woken up, and like they've run out, and they've like jumped and landed on the cloud behind her. and they're both tearing up and weeping at this point in time, as like they're trying to get to their daughter and trying to get her to return to them, trying to get the moon people to give their daughter back to them. And the procession is just kind of watching as all of this is happening. They're not really interfering necessarily, but they're just watching. And Kaguya's parents are just weeping and everything like that. And Kaguya has like kind of clicked back into herself, and she like turns and she's like runs to her parents and like throws her arms around them and is like hugging them and everything. And as like again they try to put the cloak on her, the robe on her from the moon, and she like stands up and she like berates the people from the moon, like, yes, there is hardship here, but there is also good and wonder within this world, and none of you seem to understand this, that there is stuff worth being here for, that the pain is worth the good things, that the good things are worth the pain that you have to go through even if you're here. And everyone has different different ideas of what is happiness and everything like that. And there's many different forms of here on many different levels. And while she's giving this speech, they get the robe on her, and her eyes just go blank. Like everything that she has just experienced has just been completely wiped from her. And she turns and she, walks from her parents, who are still just crying and begging her. And she walks into the procession, and, and they start heading back. And it starts to head back to the moon. And as this is going on, her parents are just watching in just utter and complete sadness and brokenheartedness as this is happening. And all across the area this is happening as well, because we see like the emperor looking up, and any of the suitors that are the suitors that are still alive are like looking up as this is happening. We see the handmaiden looking up. We see Lady Sagami and the priest looking up as this happens. We see Setemaru out in the boondocks area, in the forest, building his new home, looking up as this is happening, as the procession is making its way back into the sky and back to the moon. And they're getting closer and closer, and at one point as they're getting closer, she kind of turns and like she has this moment where she looks back one last time at Earth, and she does cry. She does have tears in her eyes again, and it's just like, is that supposed to be that even with that robe on, there's still something else made its way to the surface that made her look back and have that feeling of being sad, of leaving Earth where she's lived for the past, we never get an exact age on her, and since she grows like bamboo, it's a little bit more of like, I don't know how old she is type of a thing, but like for all of her life. And and she turns back, and it, the procession disappears into the glow of the moon, and that's where the movie ends. It's like, there any more to this story? Epilogue? Something? No? Okay, fine. So there's not really anything else to the plot there. I mean, as I said, there is a difference between what happens here and what happens in the actual like myth, the folktale that goes along with it, that this is based off of, where it's just like the ending of the folktale is a little more tragic, and the fact that her father chooses the position with the emperor over his own daughter's happiness or her own well-being. And, in the process of everything, after she marries the emperor to appease her father, she then herself, and the emperor is furious and overcome with grief for her loss, but punishes her father because of blah, 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 blah. So I don't really know exactly how else to go with that. Again, I'm not an expert on the fairy tale, unfortunately, or on the folk tale, but I mean, I do enjoy this movie. As I said, it's not my favorite, but I do like it. Not really too much else. I have to go over the cast for the English cast. So Princess Kaguya's grown-up English cast voice is Chloe Grace Moretz, who's been in multiple things. Sutamaru is voiced by Darren Criss, who is from Glee, and he's been in a bunch of other stuff as well. The Bamboo Cutter is James Caan, who I know, but I cannot remember for the life of me what I've seen him in. The Bamboo Cutter's wife / the narrator is Mary Steenburgen. Again, she's been in a lot of stuff, but I can't place her from where I know her from or anything like that. Sorry. We have Lady Sagami is voiced by Lucy Liu. Her I know, Charlie's Angels, so many other stuff. One of the suitors, or not one of the suitors, her handmaiden, Menowar Awa, her main handmaiden, is voiced by Hayden Walsh. And then the suitors, one of them is voiced by George Segal, one of them is voiced by James Marsden, one of them is voiced by Oliver Platt, one of them is voiced by Daniel Day Kim from Hawaii Five-0 and other stuff. One of them is voiced by Dean Cain. I believe Dean Cain, I believe, voices the Emperor. I think, maybe, I don't know. And then Beau Bridges is in here as someone else, and then one of the other counselors is voiced by John Chu. So, again, some of these ones, it's just like, I'm not as familiar with some of them. The names seem familiar, but I'm just not super familiar with them for, like, their other works type of a stuff. So there's that. But that's basically where this ends. There's not really any continuation of this as far as I'm aware, and unless there's some other thing with the story, I don't know. So I apologize if that's the case. There's beautiful imagery throughout the movie in regards to like how it's designed and the painting style that they use with it that makes perfect sense for why they used it for this fairy tale. But that's what I have for this movie. I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I think I only have 3 or 4 Studio Ghibli movies left, because I think next up is When Marnie Was There, and then it's Earwig and the Witch, and then it's The Boy and the Heron. So I think I only have like 3 left for Studio Ghibli. And then I do have, I'm going to do the review for Wish from Disney, since I'll be able to watch that again. I'll be able to get that review. And then I might do a short break from movie reviews for a little while before I get going on my next set of stuff for this, which would be not movies, but I'll be moving on to Digimon Frontier for that series, for Digimon, and move on to those characters. But for now, I gotta finish up the Studio Ghibli movies first, and then get a few other things out of the way, and then I might take a short break from them. But well, I still do the One Piece content. So that's what I have here. I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye. Brenda says bye too.